Have you ever walked into a party or a gathering and not known anybody else there? It can be quite nerve-wracking being the lone wolf, and you might start to overthink. What should you say? How should you act and behave to try and make a new friend or start a conversation with someone? In fact, as I was asking before, if you've got a conversation starter, I'd love to hear it. Give me a call on 1300 222 702. Sorry, 1300 800 222 is the number. It's not 1300 800 222. 1300 800 222. So we thought we'd dive into this conversation a little more closely with a psychologist to find out what's behind social anxiety and the anxiety behind the prospect of small talk. Rachel Hannam is a psychologist from North Brisbane Psychologists. Hello, Rachel.
Oh, hi, Ashwin. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Do you have a conversation starter?
Oh, gosh, it depends on the context for me, I guess. Sometimes I might just talk about the surroundings and what brought someone. It's such a therapist question, isn't it? What brought you here today?
Right. Do people open up in party situations today?
Well, if I'm in a party, I might sort of ask how they know the host or that sort of thing. But I've asked people, if the conversation's had a bit of a lull. I might ask them if I live in Brisbane. Have you lived in Brisbane your whole life? It's a question I've asked people. If they say, oh, no, I moved up here a couple of years ago from Melbourne, I might say, oh, what was that like to move from Melbourne to Brisbane? I've got a lot of natural curiosity, so my curiosity tends to kick in about people's stories and people's history.
Okay. Oh, that's a good tip to actually be curious about people than to start these conversations. Let's get to some tactics in just a moment then. Why don't we start with the foundation of this conversation, which is social anxiety itself. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Well, since this term came into the common vernacular, social anxiety, a lot of people are diagnosing themselves with it, with social anxiety disorder.
Right, like
And
ADHD, it's become a vogue thing to
that's
say you
right.
have, yeah.
Yeah, look, and yet it's fairly normal for most of us. Almost all of us will have social anxiety sometimes, which really just means a feeling of being anxious in a situation where there are other people. Perhaps we used to call it shyness, self consciousness, awkwardness. I mean, in the severe cases, social anxiety can mean that people don't go out, they don't go to the party, they have a panic attack before the job interview. And if people, if it's really interfering with their life, then getting professional help to manage the anxiety and get some help with the social skills required will be an important step for that person. But the rest of us, I get social anxiety. And my job is people. So I want to say that because, I think it's pretty normal. Do you ever get social anxiety, Ashwin?
I do, and I think about when it happens the most. It's when I feel like I don't belong in the situation. Like if I'm in a group,
Yes.
I notice this sometimes. I've got lots of good female friends, but a lot of them have just had kids. And if I'm around four mothers and I haven't had a baby, obviously, they're all talking about baby, school, nappies, and I just feel, I don't have anything to contribute to this conversation. So I feel myself feeling outside, like a real outsider sometimes in those situations. And I'm just wondering, when you feel like you're not part of the tribe of that conversation, that's when I feel the most stiff and awkward.
Of course, because then you start focusing on yourself. Everybody does this, by the way, thinking, I don't have anything to say about this, which is self-consciousness, which is where we actually need to forget about ourselves and dial up the curiosity and ask questions and, be interested in finding out more because there are certain life experiences that we just haven't had. And as a psychologist, that happens to me quite often where my client doesn't, I don't have the experience that they're talking about. So I've got to ask more questions and I may not be able to relate to it at all, but it doesn't mean I can't learn.
I like that model. So when you're with your tribe, feel that connection because you're on the same page. But when you're not with your tribe, dial into the curiosity so you can be an explorer of what they're going through.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So are there any foundations of social anxiety that we should be aware of? You said it's self-consciousness. Is there an evolutionary basis? Is there anything we should know about that will make us understand what we're feeling in the moment, that anxiety?
Mm. Oh, I think there are evolutionary and biological sort of reasons for it because, as you mentioned, belonging, connection, and belonging and acceptance. These are some of the most primal connection needs or attachment needs that we have as human beings because we can't survive very well as an individual out in the wild. We'll probably die. So we're
Okay.
pretty hardwired to be in the tribe. So just know that it's very, very normal to feel some anxiety at any perceived threat that we don't belong or we're not in the tribe. But, take a few deep breaths, feel your feet, slow down. Remember that we're all human. Nothing that's human can be alien, as they say. And yeah, lose focus on yourself and put focus on the other and have a handful of good questions. Like my question before, if I meet someone who says, "Oh no, I haven't always lived in Brisbane, I've come from some other place." What's that like? What's it like for you to live in Brisbane? When someone says they're an architect or a truck driver or whatever, I might say, "Oh, what's that like? I haven't done that job. What's that like? Tell me more. How did you get into that?" What questions and how questions are a really good way to start a curious question.
Yes, I like this because I was going to ask you about small talk because that does make some people anxious. So one of your tips is to ask questions, but take us into small talk because some people don't like it. They feel like they're being trivial. What should we know about
Yes.
small talk?
Oh, I love this question and I love this topic because I used to be one of those people who'd say, "Oh, I hate small talk." And you hear this quite a bit, right? I can't stand small talk. And it's funny that people say that because research shows about one third of human conversation counts as small talk. So you take it away, and there's a lot of communication that would not be happening. Now, the thing is, there's different research. Some research showed that the more small talk people do in their lives, the less satisfied they are with life. But they didn't account for the fact that those people didn't get sort of the big talk, the juicy conversations. Apparently, more recent research suggests that if we're good at both, if we're good at the small talk and the juicy conversations, we tend to be happier. First of all, that's because we're just interacting with other human beings. And if we get the balance right for ourselves, just interacting with others tends to make us happier because social isolation is not good for us. But also, small talk can pave the way for deeper conversations. We can't have all our conversations be super deep. So, we want to be able to um, get started in our conversations. So much goes on in communication too that's below the level of conscious awareness. So we're picking up all sorts of cues, even when we're talking about the weather or the latest movie or what happened on the way to the club tonight or whatever it might be.
Yes.
We're picking up on people's personalities. We're building rapport. There's all sorts of communication happening at other levels. We're synchronizing our brains just through the small talk. So I'd really encourage people not to be so down on small talk.
No, you're right. It's almost like a radar, isn't it? Like a radar detects things that are in the environment. Small talk lets you look at micro expressions and faces and cues that people are giving off. So it's a radar.
It is, and it's that mind to mind connection that paves the way for us to have more rapport and connectedness with somebody, so that we might have a more meaningful relationship.
Rachel Amber's joined us from Parramatta. Hello, Amber.
Oh, good morning.
What would you like to say about social anxiety?
Oh, it's tricky at any age. So I think the best thing to do is get people talking about themselves and hearing their story. And they've usually got interesting stories, but you can't ask anything prying, anything too personal or prying if you haven't really met them. So if you keep it light, like, oh, do you like gardening? What's your favourite flower? Sort of, what did you hate about primary school or anything that, you know something about?
Yes.
Yes, so you can engage with their story.
I like that, Rachel. What should we know, Rachel? Stay on the line with me, Amber, if you will. What should we know about
Sure.
prying questions?
About prying
It's
questions.
a risk, isn't it? Because you want to be interesting, but some of the interesting conversations are too deep, aren't they? Do we have to be quite careful with not going too personal?
Oh, absolutely. I think we all, need to trust our intuition about where those boundaries lie, and intimacy builds over time. Psychological, emotional intimacy builds over time. But I agree with Amber. It's, if you find out that someone has a passion or a hobby for something, bring your curiosity to that. And if I don't have anything else to say, I might ask someone like, if you won the lotto tomorrow, how would you spend that $1,000,000
Right,
on
okay.
something
That's
that
another big
everybody's
question.
thought about?
Yeah. Amber, when you said social anxiety happens at any age, are you still having to meet new people? Are you joining new groups and things?
I've had to do it, but I've confronted it enough that I'm not fearful now. So if you can get your fear in check, because it's usually fear of fear, it's not really anything real,
Yes.
So if you can get your fear in check, you can conquer it. And I approach people in the street and they're happy to talk. Every
do you?
stranger is happy to talk.
What do you talk to people on the street about?
Well, I see someone with a very young puppy. I say, "Oh, how old's your puppy? He looks like a little baby." And,
Right.
they love it. But you can't ask, what do you do for work? Because it might have some stereotypical things that suddenly people think they're being judged,
Yes.
So you've got to be careful of the ground you tread in, because some people, if they're strangers, they don't want to disclose things that they might find uncomfortable for them. And everyone's got their fear of something, many things. So you've got to keep it very general and very superficial and very friendly.
Keep it general, but you can still be interesting even if it's general like that. I have a hot tip that I got taught when someone gave me a hot tip because we at the ABC, sometimes we have to go out into the street and interview people on the streets and start conversations with them. And someone said to me, focus on people with hats. Hat people are just friendlier than non-hat people. I don't know why, but it seems to work.
Yeah, not many wear hats these days.
No, they're a bit quirky.
Even though we should.
Yeah, that's right. But something to watch out for. Amber, thanks for calling in.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to
Thanks,
ABC
Amber.
Overnights with Rachel Hannam, Dr. Rachel Hannam. Peter has just messaged to say, I'm from Armidale, and when I'm travelling anywhere, I wear a polo shirt or a cap with Armidale on it. It's an amazing icebreaker. I even started lifelong friendships over it. What a tip. This is back to my hat theory, isn't it, Rachel? Just fun hats, just bring people together.
And it is, yeah. And Amber mentioned dogs. Dogs can be good conversation starters if you've got one and you're out with your dog. But, yeah, wearing an unusual piece that, maybe has the name of where you're from. And it's interesting what Amber just said reminds me, and what you said about the hat. The research shows that women tend to, make the initial connection by complimenting, maybe complimenting someone's hat or their scarf or their shoes. And men tend to make that initial interaction a little bit of an insult or a dig.
Right. I noticed
Which is an interesting.
Yeah, the ribbing, the man ribbing. And I've noticed this because my co-workers outside of the ABC, all female, and they're very complimentary of each other, behaviour, clothing, something. I just really noticed that dynamic, whereas, yeah, you're right, men do insult each other more often.
Yeah, and apparently, women are more affiliative. Women tend to have more social, emotional support in their lives. So maybe the men need to start going, nice scarf, nice hat.
Yes. Do some people react badly to insults? Because people come from different cultures and they might not get the ribbing culture of Australia sometimes when you try to insult them.
Oh, there's definitely some cultural differences in the research I was looking at yesterday in terms of how we do small talk and the cultural mismatches.
Oh, yeah.
I was even reading that in Scandinavian countries, they don't do as much small talk and they're more tolerant of awkward silences amongst strangers. And so, doing lots of small talk to say your previous guest from Sweden, might be not quite in fitting with his culture, but, in Australian culture or some other, or maybe outback, more rural cultures.
Yes.
So there's the city-country divide, there's different cultures. So, we probably have to, spend some time picking up on the vibe of the local culture.
We're such a funny, quirky species. I noticed this. You're absolutely right. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with silence. I live in an apartment building, and if I walk into the lift, there's almost a pressure to talk to someone that I don't know. But I found a tactic people use, and I've used this myself, is if you stay at the same distance from the front door, you're more expected to talk. But if you take 2 steps back, so you're diagonally as far as possible from each other in the lift, there's less pressure to talk because you've maximised the distance between you and the
Mm.
stranger. It's so ridiculous, but it's
Well, I mean, but it's there's so much communication that goes on between humans that's non-verbal. We are animals after all, and animals have a lot of non-verbal communication. All their communication's non-verbal. So yeah, we're always picking up on what things mean, and we have quite a strong intuition about what it means if someone steps back and creates more distance, or just turns their shoulder slightly, or
yes.
yeah,
The micro expressions.
yes.
Laura writes, I hate when you try your best at small talk and they don't ask anything back, but compliments
Mm,
always work, like earrings or a bag someone may have. Yeah, does that
yes.
compliments? We haven't talked about compliments. Well, you said that women are more affiliative, and that's an example of that.
Yeah, look, that's what I use. I love your earrings. Hey, that's an interesting handbag. Where did you get it? Women are very good at talking about that sort of stuff. And it it does naturally pave the way to some small sense of connection which can grow and then become more substantial. I probably don't give, two hoots about their handbag, but it's a little way in
Yes.
to start conversing, and then it
Okay.
can be sort of more meaningful over time.
Good tip. I reckon you can practice your compliments as well. Get more used to it. If you're not used to, if no one complimented you growing up, you might not have that skill of throwing a good
Mm.
compliment, but it's one that you can throw out there. Before we wrap up, Rachel, what about listening? Because I feel that's an important part of dealing with anxiety.
Yeah, well, because anxiety makes us more self-referential. Social anxiety is really a physical anxiety with lots of thoughts such as they're judging me, no one likes me, I'm screwing this up, I'm being so awkward. If we can take the focus off ourselves and really focus on listening longer, might need to, breathe in order to listen. I define listening as a willingness to be influenced by what you're hearing. So if I'm hearing, a story about somebody's life, my willingness to be influenced might just be that I'm, picturing it in my head what they're saying, and already that person who's speaking is influencing what's going on in my mind, and I'm listening for, you know, cues in the conversation for me to ask another question, and when appropriate, share my own story, so that we've got that back and forth dialogue, because by definition, a dialogue is two-way. And yeah, we've all been stuck with someone who wants to tell their story. And I advocate for, being a confident, empathic interrupter, at some
Yes, I
point.
like that. Yes, the skill of interrupting. It's a good one to know when to time it. Dave writes in, my father wears a hat and he's a cranky old codger. You cannot stereotype people by clothing. Dave from Northmead, blowing up my theory of hat people. Thank you for that, Dave. Alcohol helps, writes Trev from Hillland. He's not wrong, is it? I mean, in some sense, obviously you don't want to encourage drinking or over drinking, but it's been the go-to social lubricant in this country for a long time.
And in many countries, and for a long time in many different cultures, because, alcohol relaxes us. But of course, we become socially obnoxious after the third or fourth drink.
Right.
So, yeah, be
Okay.
careful.
One to watch out for. What footy team do you follow is always a good one as well. Yeah, sports can bind people, but some people don't have a footy team. They'll feel pressure, but in the right circumstance.
I would normally say I have no football team, but, I used to play netball. You
Yes.
can always take the conversation somewhere.
Yeah, but yes and in improv, isn't it? You take it, you say yes to
Yes.
the offer that you're given and take it somewhere else.
Yeah, I really like yes and. It's a good one.
Dr. Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you so much, Ash.